What's the difference between a psychologist and a magician? Hi, welcome to the Authentic Action Podcast. I'm Angel, your hostess, and today's topic is emotional fitness. Have you been feeling overwhelmed, chronically ill, unclear about your purpose? Well, you might need more emotional fitness. Emotional fitness is the topic of my upcoming book. Hopefully, not hopefully, definitely, it will be done soon. And um, so it's a topic fresh on my mind. And well, the reason I'm writing the book and that it's fresh on my mind is because emotional dysregulation seems to be increasingly a problem in our world. So, many people think that being too emotional is the problem. And so they tend to want to numb themselves or, suppress the emotions, repress the emotions, distract ourselves from our emotions. But actually, that suppression, that numbing is another form of dysregulation. And dysregulation makes us subpar. We are these phenomenal, super beings, these human thinking, self aware, consciousness expanding meat machines. And so we're doing ourselves and each other a disservice when we go through so much of our lives in a dysregulated state. And I think most of us recognize when someone is overly emotional, and we think of that as just plain emotional when people are dysregulated. However, this is really the point that I'm trying to drive home is that suppression, being unemotional, being numb, is not equivalent to really being emotionally fit, really understanding how to feel your feelings, express your feelings in healthy ways, um, navigate them, when they're coming up, recognize when you're becoming dysregulated, re-regulate yourself before you wrecking ball your relationships or, yeah, ask me how I know about all of that. Anyhow, I'm looking at my notes over here. You can't master yourself unless you master your emotions. And this does not mean suppressing, gaining complete control by repressing or suppressing. Repressing is just unconscious suppressing, really. Um, and that's not the same. It's just about just as bad as allowing them to run amok, 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 right? And I don't think this is talked about enough. In fact, many of the leaders that I follow and who I respect greatly still promote this idea of suppressing emotions, not bringing emotions to your decision making, not showing your emotions. And there's aspects of that that are true. And so I want to navigate the nuances of all of that a little bit if I can or try to. So emotional intelligence, as the phrase was coined a while back, I think maybe it was Stephen Covey, anyhow, as a type of intelligence, our ability to navigate emotions, both to recognize and name them in ourselves and to recognize and name them in others, um, is a skill. It's a skill that we're probably born with some natural level of ability in, like so many other skills and levels of intelligence. And it's a skill that we can develop and get better by way of understanding it more, cultivating habits, just like maybe. Like one of my favorite mentors is Jim Quick. He had a traumatic brain injury. He really struggled to learn to read, to learn to comprehend, to learn to um, remember things. And then with lots of practice and structured skill set building, he's now known as like the memory guru. I forget the term, but anyhow, I'm paying him for a course, as do hundreds, if not thousands of others for helping us improve our reading skills specifically because he figured out how to overcome that limitation and transcend it and in fact use that barrier as motivation to become extra good at it. So that's one of the little key pieces that I'm trying to get across. And as you may be able to tell, I sometimes get a little lost in the weeds. So I'm going to keep coming back to my notes and try not to get too far out on that and just focus on the emotional fitness component because that's really the first part that we need to get. If we cannot learn to recognize when we're dysregulated and re-regulate ourselves, then we don't have much hope of then coming to the like the first step sort of learning to get to know our feelings, learning how to feel our feelings, name our feelings, express our feelings in healthy ways. Right now, our society is really not good at this at all, to say the least, to put it mildly. And in fact, our current systems seem to be really just encouraging us to fall into that dysregulated state every time we try to pull ourselves out of it and then maybe to numb ourselves, distract ourselves. Um, and while that's might keep us at this low level, easy to control, you know, sort of half alive state, it is not our full capacity. It's not the best we can be. And it makes me sad a lot. So one of my greatest motivators in this life and on this channel and writing my book is to try to wake us up a little bit, myself and you, and keep waking us up because it's an ongoing process. Um, to not fall into that unconsciousness that happens when we suppress our feelings and our emotions. And one of the biggest reasons why I feel like this is more pressing than ever is we have AI on the horizon. Actually, I get paid currently to train large language models, so I'm pretty submerged in that work and I see how quickly they've evolved just in the 1 year I've been working with them. And we got robots on the way. And when we combine those two things, the one thing that we're going to have that they don't have is our ability to use our feelings, our intuition, which is really a lot of data that's not just our own data collected from our own experiences, but actually the data that's in our DNA, the data that's in our society, our psychological memes, our archetypes. Gets complicated. And it's also very simple because simplistically, you really can't do anything about the external, at least from where most of us are right now, but you can do something about the internal. And if we all focus on up-leveling our internal capacity, mastering our own emotions, getting more fit both physically and emotionally and mentally, then we will have more of a capacity collectively to do that. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. And I really do feel like um, the time is ripe. It's the time is always now, but really we are ripe as a species to transcend our current level, up level, at least a little bit, maybe just a couple of points on David Hawkins' consciousness scale, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, look it up. It's pretty good stuff. I'm going to include a little reference to that in my book, but it's really a whole lifetime body of work. So if you get interested in someone's lifetime body of work, the cool thing is these days you can listen to a string of audiobooks and in a day acquire their whole lifetime of work. So that's what I've recently been doing with David Hawkins. And I will say also that I've visited his work before, and through my lifetime, I get this sense of like the peeling an onion or layering a parfait or however you want to think of it, where there's these. Well, I like this spiral of life, wheel of life symbol because there's this iteration quality where you're circling back around, but maybe expanded or contracted just a little bit in the next iteration to learn the lesson with a little bit different nuance or from a little bit different angle. Anyhow, back to emotional intelligence, or EQ as it's often abbreviated. This includes learning to recognize more dysregulated, and I will remind you that includes both that running amok emotions that we're more familiar with recognizing, and that suppression, that going numb, that running away, that retreat, which I think way more people are doing right now, and we seem to be less conscious of. But is really one of the main things that I want to address in the work that I'm doing, because I know it's scary to feel. We're all afraid of that overwhelm, going overboard, expressing too much. And indeed, sometimes we're going to have to have grace and patience and compassion with ourselves and with each other, because it does get messy sometimes as we learn. If you think about your favorite toddler, you can think about how they throw tantrums, and we're often, we call it uh, the terrible twos, right, as an expression, because we're all familiar with how toddlers have a hard time handling their emotions. Well, many of us as adults, and myself, I am certainly in this camp where I've not come very far from that toddler phase in my ability to handle my emotions. I've learned to suppress them more. And that brings me to the next topic that I want to get to, which is that suppression might initially seem like it's a better solution because it does calm the situation. And in an actual emergency, it's always best to keep calm. And many of us have learned early in life, perhaps, as early as the first day or maybe even beforehand, where we have to learn to suppress our emotions to survive, because maybe we have an oversensitive or overreactive or traumatized caretaker who doesn't know how to handle emotions. And unfortunately, that's how this cycle of neglect and abuse continues. And I feel like has gotten a little bit worse in my lifetime. Of course, I only have my lifetime for perspective. So, I am aware that that perspective might be completely wrong. And I don't think that part really matters so much, because whether it's getting worse or not, it's still a prevalent issue, and one that has had a negative impact in my life and has a potential to have great positive impact in my life and in yours. So that's why I'm excited and passionate about diving into this topic. So I was diagnosed with autoimmune issues, uncurable systemic inflammation that would probably kill me by age 50 when I was like 12, right before puberty. And I'm about to turn 54, still alive and kicking, although I've had my turbulence, my waves. I do still contend with autoimmune issues, but I have managed them much better than I think I would have if I'd have gone the conventional, current industrial disease complex route. And instead, and to be fair, I would have gone that route if they would have had any solutions for me that had helped. But being that they didn't, that really inspired me to have to take my own healing into my own hands. My own wellness journey has been one of exploration and, personal trial and error and much trial, and some success. So I really have come to understand, and my current belief is that the suppression of emotions is what is leading to this escalation in autoimmune disease. And I want to pause there and add, that's not the only thing. I mean, you could circle that argument around and get it to maybe include everything, but there's chemical toxicity, which you could again relate back to that unconsciousness, which comes from emotional suppression. But I also want to say that I think we talk about the neurology, the brain, or some of us do. I'm fascinated by the brain, and I've spent a couple of decades learning more and more about it as best I can, both anatomically and neurochemically and psychologically and socially. And in my studies, I've come to understand, um, that the brain is plastic, that it changes, that it's fallible, that it fools itself, that it's changeable, and that it's creating the chemicals. It's, or at least largely, pardon me, I'm getting parched over here talking nonstop. It is really the thing that creates the bulk of the chemistry that goes on in our bodies. Even when we take a drug, it's really the reaction, our brain's reaction to that drug, and then the chemistry that cascades from that that then gives us the feelings that we have, or the lack of feelings that we have. Um, so I know I went off on a tangent and got a little bit lost there in the brain stuff, which is a whole world in and of itself for sure. Or actually, all of our world is really in this dark bony box we call the skull, or in the mash of the brain inside that. Um, But to get myself back on track, the brain's job is to respond to input data, and that data comes in many, many forms, from chemicals that we ingest and nutrients, however we want to label them, to electromagnetic waves, many of which are coming from other humans and also from our devices. Like there's a lot to it, and I am not at all claiming to have a handle, anybody's handle on all of it by any means. But I have come to a pretty good understanding of some basic tools that all of us can use, and that actually other humans have come to this, similar conclusions for thousands of years now. So it helps give me confidence, because these are tools I came to in my own personal journey, really the hard way in many cases, as many healers for whatever reason seem to do. Um, and those tools include the mindset, they include breathing, they include moving, they include um, rhythm, touch. I'm kind of all over the place now because I lost my place in my notes, but let me just overarchingly say there are many tools, and that's what I'm trying to organize in this book that I'm writing, that we all can use for free anytime, quite easily, and in just a couple minutes in most cases, that can help re-regulate us, and then also that can help us build more emotional intelligence, more awareness, and more resilience, and more. So, the resilience piece is like, instead of being so sensitive that we're afraid to even feel our feelings, because as soon as we feel any feelings, we're dysregulated, we can build resilience and like expand that bandwidth, our capacity to feel our feelings without becoming dysregulated. And some of the tools for building that resilience include learning to name your feelings, learning to express your feelings. Some art therapy techniques that I've used have been very helpful. Meditation helps pretty much everyone, or nearly everyone who finds a modality that's helpful to them. I like moving meditations like Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga. Um, Sound healing has been great for me, learning about the vagus nerve, which you can access right here near the neck. And just if you put your hands while you're talking or humming, you'll feel that vibration in your vocal cords. That is vibrating your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve is attached to your every one of your organ systems in a way that helps snap you back into that parasympathetic nervous system. So there are real ways to, I don't want to quite say hack the system, but trigger the system, trip the system, flip the system back over into the parasympathetic from the sympathetic, or the fight, flight, or freeze uh, nervous system, which are literally two different systems in our body. So even though, of course, they're interconnected and related because they're part of our body, but really when we switch into the fight or flight or freeze or I like to add fuck to that because I think it's underappreciated how much our hormones, especially our reproductive drives, actually do play into that. But that's a topic for another podcast, I'm sure. But in any case, when we flip over into that parasympathetic nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system is switched off for the most part, and we're just doing our primal basic needs, our breathing and our heart rate, and we no longer have access to our higher thinking capacity. So when we're kept in that state, that's a place where we are very easy to manipulate and control and program, and a place where we don't make our best decisions. We aren't our highest best self. So again, why I'm passionate on helping myself learn to recognize when I'm flipped over in the parasympathetic and get myself back into the sympathetic as quick as possible. And then also learning to build that resilience so that I can expand my capacity, my bandwidth, my ability to handle navigating different emotional, my own different emotions and other humans' different emotions, because we humans are very contagious to each other. We're very receptive to one another's energy. We've all experienced what happens like at a concert or at a church when we sing together. It's a very profound collective group experience that we are capable of having, like some insects and birds and fish. But again, a topic for another conversation perhaps. But I do think that it's worth mentioning that, to me, that is an aspect of consciousness, that ability to have like a collective consciousness. And we also have this individual consciousness capacity that we're developing. And when we combine those two, we have some pretty exciting, fascinating potential. So I ask you to keep that in mind, and to also remember that because of this tendency to be contagious to each other, when we're, I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase hurt people, and that is true. And also healing people help people heal. So I want to say it like that because I don't really think we can heal each other usually, although there's some exceptions and caveats to that. But what we can do is create openings and space of possibility for ourselves to heal, for each other to heal. So, and there is a profound healing effect in the human touch. And many of us know right now there's this huge loneliness epidemic, and many of us just need a long hug, like probably a few a day for a while, and that would help us heal. Now, is it the hug healing us, or is it just re-regulating our system so that it can heal itself? I don't know, I'll let you be the judge of that because it's probably a little of both, but from my perspective. But in any case, it's true that healing happens when we get out of the way, or when we allow it, or when we support it. And it happens faster when we're in the company of other people who are healing or having a higher frequency. And it happens slower when we're in a lower frequency or around other people who are suffering and, you know, um, wallowing in self-pity or the victim mentality or all of that. So, um, one of the great tools for building resilience is learning to, what I call, tune myself or raise your frequency. So, just like tuning a radio dial, you can learn to tune your body so that it's more coherent and harmonious with with the natural cycles around you and in your own body, which is part of the natural cycles around you. Um, yeah, and again, that's a pretty vast topic, and I'm fairly much a beginner slash just like a beginner novice in so much of this work. So I'm a little hesitant to dive into that right now, but it is a topic that I intend to dive into a lot more in the future. So you can look forward to that. Um, Yes, there is hope, and research is showing that there are many old, tried and true ways that are now getting proven, and some new ways. Like we have some new devices. I have this heart coherence device. I'm looking around, but it's not right here, that helps me measure like the regularity and variability. I'm touching here because it's a clip that goes on my ear, and it gives me some biofeedback on my heart rate and the variability. And that's helping me to recognize when I'm more coherent or less coherent. And I've also worn a glucose monitor that's helped me recognize some of the metabolic dysfunction that's going into my body, which is a topic I'm going to get into a lot more deeply because it's something that's been a big influence in me. So, and I'm on the way, I have some ketone uh, blood and urine strips on the way because I think, again, that metabolic piece is a big piece of this escalating dysregulation that's going on. So when you talk about the side of dysregulation that is the side most of us recognize where uh, emotions are running amok, I think we underappreciate how much hormones, which are especially prevalent in women and especially during puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, which are getting sort of not sort of very much disrupted by so many endocrine disruptors and so many things in our diet and in our environment. And then there's exercise, which has been, decreased dramatically in our current culture and has been shown to be as effective as the majority of medicines out there or medications. I don't really want to call them medicines, drugs that are available, pharma drugs. Um, have a pretty dismal success rate, and many of them also create more problems than they even potentially help, even if they work well. So I urge you to look into other solutions. And I'm not saying they don't have their place. I've taken many myself, and I probably will. Still, I've got some ibuprofen here. That's a pharma drug, even though it's not prescription anymore. But um, I am by no means saying I will never take a prescription drug. I really appreciate that they exist, they have their place, but they're being overused and they're being used for chronic disease where they don't really help is the thing. And with chronic disease, a lot of times, if not all the time, there is an association to mismanaged stress or stress that's caused emotions that haven't been processed in a healthy way and instead have been suppressed, repressed, and eventually create stagnation and disease. That little knot of emotion that you press down and just swallow and breathe till you cannot feel it anymore, or take a shot of whiskey, or turn on the TV to distract yourself, or eat that cupcake and stuff it down. All those modes are creating disease in the body. You could look at it like the obvious way, by sitting too much, by thinking negative thoughts, by, self-harming, by poisoning ourselves. There's all these physical ways, and they're all interrelated with these mental and emotional ways. They're really not separate things, but I think we tend to think of them separately in an interesting way, or kind of compartmentalize that thought, just like we compartmentalize our emotions and act like it's not really, not really having an effect, but they are. And again, I want to reiterate, our emotions are one of the most valuable, amazing, beautiful things we have. People who can't feel emotions want to die. They want to kill themselves. Or even people who can't make any sense of their emotions, apraxia, where they're all confused. I think it's called apraxia. Forgive me if that's incorrect term. But in any case, um, the ability to feel emotions and even our ability to create stories about our emotions, those electrochemical, magnetic, um, data that's going, data transfers that are going on in our bodies that then we interpret as feelings and tell ourselves stories about. I think we misinterpret them often, and we're telling really shitty stories, but it doesn't mean that that's not valuable and that we couldn't be learning the language of our body's emotions and then learning to tell much better, more empowering stories about the effects of those, what we call feelings. So I know I kind of went all over the place with that. I tend to go far out, trying to bring myself back, wax and wane. So you can let me know if there's any of that is confusing or went too far out or that resonates with you and you're like, yeah, I hear you on that, or you have something to add. Um, One thing I want to add is that dysregulation is not like a total dysfunction, even though it can lead to dysfunction or, seem that way. It can spiral out of control for sure, but it's an alarm system and it's there for a reason and good reasons. And so, when the alarm first goes off, there's a reason. Maybe it's that the alarm is malfunctioning. Even that you need to look into, if your nervous system is setting off an alarm, the first thing to do is to like make sure you're not being poisoned or in danger. And actually, I think a lot more of us are being slowly poisoned. And even if we're not in direct danger, we're listening to media that is creating the sense in our brains that we are in immediate danger by watching catastrophes and by, um, getting riled up in fear and anger. That is flipping our bodies over into that sympathetic nervous system. And so that is tripping that alarm system, and that's creating that chronic sense of anxiety that so many people are experiencing. And rather than think that there's something wrong with you and that you need to drug yourself or distract yourself or kill yourself, because you're so dysfunctional, please, I urge you to consider that's a healthy response to an unhealthy environment. And there are things you can do to change both your immediate environment and your exposure to the broader environment. And there's things you can do to, like I mentioned earlier, expand your bandwidth so that you have a greater capacity to handle toxicity in your environment without becoming overwhelmed by it, without being flipped over into that parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm sure you know people who are much better at handling things, and you probably know people who are really terrible at handling things. And most of us are somewhere on that spectrum in between those extremes. And most of us have probably experienced, a further end of both of those extremes. I personally have certainly had times where I really didn't handle things well, and I've had things where I was, cool as a cucumber, as they say. And I've also done a lot of work, some of it quite painful and some of it quite joyful, to learn healthier ways to express myself. This podcast is one of them, learning ways to express my thoughts and feelings through writing, through talking to friends, through writing songs, through art is a big one for me. I love neurographic art therapy has been helpful. Sound therapy, as I mentioned, both in singing and in more um, specific, like chakra focused, intentional sound healing. Again, there's a whole world of healing modalities. It's really, I have a list, an ongoing list of over 100 that I'm putting in alphabetical order that I have looked into, and most of which I've at least tried. So, and I'm sure there are many, many more. So, um, yeah, I urge you to remember that there's nothing wrong with you that can't heal or at least get better. Maybe you can't fix something completely, but you can shift your focus from the worst of whatever is the reality you're living in to something better in the reality that you're living in. So again, I'm not asking you to lie, and in fact, I'm really big on honesty because lying weakens our whole system, and that's another topic I'm going to get into because I do think that is part of what's creating this chronic dysregulated state that so many of us are sort of looping in and out of or just chronically stuck in a lot of the time. Um, yeah, vagal tone is a real key. Learning to name more of your emotions and being okay with learning to feel your emotions. And that might take a partnership with a special friend, or I'm building a community. I've had some great coaches and great friends to help me with that, and I want to be a support system and create safe spaces for you and others if you're looking for that. There's me and there's lots of others in this expanding space who are creating more and more ways for us to help each other learn these skills, develop these skills, heal from our collective and individual wounds, and move forward into this new era. It's 2025. It is a new era, not just, I'm not just speaking some hoo-ha out my hoo-ha. It is true. I might be speaking out my hoo-ha. My brain. My brain gets easily distracted, you may have noticed, and easily entertained, which I appreciate. And I do want to add that even though, as I mentioned, healing can be hard work and it can be scary and painful, it can also be very fun and joyful. And the best healing work is laughter and love and touch and um, true connection and communication. And so, if we can all remember that, then I think we could actually get to it a lot quicker because it doesn't have to be suffering. The suffering is actually made up, the majority of, and I'm not saying there isn't pain. There is, but the vast majority of the pain that we are currently experiencing is in the form of self-created suffering or collectively created suffering, like wars and disease and um, not death. I want to put the asterisk that death is actually a beautiful part of this process that we call life. And at least my current understanding um, is such that I would not, if I had infinite wishes with no bad outcomes, I still wouldn't wish for no death because even though it is hard for the living to deal with, I believe it's a beautiful reset in a way. But I don't really know, and that's one of the beautiful things about it as well. It's this great mystery that keeps making meaning in this moment, in this life, relevant. I think if we took death away, it would be life would become less meaningful, and um, yeah, we would be less driven to find a purpose. And I want to wrap up, if I can, on that point, which is that in my research and study of other people's research, I have really gotten a firm idea that, um, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. I looked at my notes. That was that was something. That's my we call that the ADHD brain. Um, we'll see if it comes back to me. Well, I'll get back to just talking about summing up that I think metabolic disease is a huge key. I think um, learning to feel our feelings and really express them and expand that bandwidth is what's going to lead us to lead a richer, more vibrant, um, more healthy and happy life. So I'm here for it. I'm still working on it. Um, I I do believe there's not a direct correlation between effort and output. So if we can learn to ease up when it's getting hard, and it doesn't mean don't work hard or, you know, there's a difference between joyfully working hard, like in the way that we build muscle, that we build strength through practice. Such a beautiful thing, and I really love it. And we get better and better and better by those iterations, doing a thing that's just a little bit harder than we're used to, and then coming around again, resting, coming around and doing it even better, resting, coming around, doing it even better. That's a beautiful, amazing, wonderful thing, and I want more of it. And that's different from efforting and coming around and doing the same thing again and just getting older and beaten down and trying harder and getting further and further away from our goals, or at least, coming around and realizing we're no closer to our goals and we've just been like spinning our wheels. And ask me how I know about that feeling. I know because I have done it a lot. So you're not alone if you're out there doing that. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, there is a loneliness epidemic. Suicide's on the rise, dysregulation is on the rise, anxiety is on the rise, lack of focus is on the rise, all the disorders, all sorts of D words and C words are on the rise. And some of my favorite C words, though, can also be on the rise, and those are creativity and courage and curiosity and community and connection and communication and coherence and calming. I'm going to wrap it up there because I could go on. Hey, hit up our sponsors. That's the Sleeping Dragons Company over at Etsy right now, and maybe on my website again. Sleeping Dragons Company, my own company, where we carry lots of great phthalate-free fragrances and essential oil-based aromatherapy perfumes, heart-shaped stones, natural pigments, all sorts of things for your creativity and self-love needs. So awaken your creative spirit over at Sleeping Dragons Company today. You can find them by going over to Etsy and looking for Sleeping Dragons Company, or typing in www.sleepingdragonsco.com. That should get you there. And our other sponsor, the Authentic Action Academy, the sister invention or seed to this podcast, the Authentic Action Podcast, both of which are aimed at creating more creative community, helping humanity evolve into more consciousness, more kindness, and more curiosity. I want to add courage in there. I already mentioned my favorite C words. Let's wrap it up with that joke. I'm going to do a quick skim here and see if I forgot any key points. Yeah, some of these things are quite simple, like you could be breathing wrong or just be eating the wrong things at the wrong time, or many, many, many of us are just eating too much of too many things. So less really could be more in many cases. Um, the news, the programming is designed to keep you dysregulated, numb, and dumb. So turn off that television, find something better. Remember, you could be speaking for yourself. If you find yourself repeating phrases that everyone around you is repeating, which I'm hearing a lot of, check yourself. You might be speaking someone else's program. Just saying. I'm saying, and I'm saying. There you go. Uh, yeah, vagal tone, tapping, humming, drumming, singing. All of those are great windows or doorways in to the healing process. So I urge you to find something that you love, laughter, and put a little bit more intention or focus on it. Find yourself a coach, join a community. I have a couple. You are welcome to join me, and I hope that you do. I have lots of ways in that are free. I have other ways in that you can help support me so that I can keep supporting myself. And however feels right to you is perfect. So I hope you will do that. I didn't even write my joke down. I just left it up over here. So that means I got to get to it over here. Let's see. If I can find it, it's under the very best psychology jokes of today. What's the difference between a psychologist and a magician? A magician pulls rabbits out of hats, whereas a psychologist pulls habits out of rats. Shh. There you go. Peace. Till next time. I'll be seeing you. Stay courageous. Ciao for now.